Hey, Kitchen Stewardship, Katie Kimball here, and I am so honored to have the author Greg Horn with me here today. I have to tell you, over 10 years ago, when I first started writing Kitchen Stewardship and getting, more concerned and aware of what's in our environment and what's in our world, one of the random books that I found and read, and of course I got it from the library because I don't really buy books. Don't tell. Don't tell the author. It was called Living Green, and it was by Greg Horn. And I still to this day think of some of the topics in that book and some of the lists of, personal product ingredients that he told us to stay away from. And I put those things back on the shelf and tell other people to do the same. So it's such an honor to talk to you today, Greg. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Katie. Great to be here.
Yeah, so Kitchen Stewardship readers, you are going to love this because, of course, here at KS, we talk about finding that balance between our health and our environment and our time and our budget. But we have to know what to do to be healthy. And I feel like Greg's new book, Living Well, is like this huge comprehensive roadmap smashed between two covers in one book. And there's so much information in there. So today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of where that book came from for him and what kinds of things we as readers can learn from it. But first, let me introduce you a little bit more to Greg. He is the author of the new book, Living Well, and his bestseller, Living Green, is the book we just talked about. He's been a leading innovator in healthy and sustainable business for over 20 years, including being the former CEO of GNC, which my brother used to work there, and Garden of Life, a supplement company I know you're all familiar with. He's currently focused on commercializing nutrition innovation, which we'll talk about that because I don't know what it means, through his company, Specialty Nutrition Consulting. And most importantly for us, he is a father of a few kids who have made it through childhood and are now young adults, I understand.
That's right.
Yes, so your success, they made it. They still talk to you? They still like you?
They do, and they claim to enjoy it.
See, okay, so you have clout. We all can listen to you. I'm so curious, Greg, how did you personally get passionate about green living? And then what's the pathway from the topic of your first book, which was just the green part of life, to this whole comprehensive living well?
So, Katie, I had a couple entry points into the green living area. The first was when I was about 15 years old. I read an old book that was up on my mom's shelf that she had got from a health food store probably 10 years before that. And it was called Sugar Blues. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book. It's from the 70s or something. And I read that book and I cut most sugar out of my diet. Up to that point, I was a typical teenager with the sodas and candy and, cereal that turns your milk pink. Mm-hmm. And we know that. And I stopped all that. Didn't become
so you were no longer a typical teenager at all.
I became a weird. That's my entry point into being weird, which I've made a career of ever since. So I ended up feeling so much better and just with the confidence and visceral knowledge that you can only have when you're a teenager probably. Mm-hmm. I said, hey, this is how I want to spend my career. This is how I want to, I'm interested in this. I finally found what I'm interested in. So that led me to a career in business, in creating and marketing healthy, organic, natural, nutritional products, starting at GNC and later at Garden of Life. But while I was at GNC, my second entry point was I got sick. We had a new office tower that we moved into, and we had remodeled it. And we had new carpet and new wall coverings and new furniture with outgassing pressboard and flame retardants and all those things, sealed windows. And I got sick. So I got something called chemical sensitivity or multiple chemical sensitivity.
Yeah. And I think your book was the first time I'd ever heard of anything like that. And as soon as you said that, I was like, I totally remember reading about that because I had no idea such a thing existed. And now we're remodeling this summer and I'm like, we're going to do this and this and this. So
yeah,
it's good information.
Yeah, so I had to do that too. So I had to change my house and I had to change my clothes and even my mattress and my food. And I was really lucky, Katie, because I was able to reach out to experts that I already knew in health and wellness. And I was also lucky because I got better. So it's now very manageable. It doesn't ever totally go away, but it's very manageable now. And so after I was doing better, I decided to write Living Green, which is my first book about kind of how to still live a life in a pretty toxic world, what to avoid, how to identify it, how to manage it. And that included a lot of different aspects of your life. So that was that's how I became an author. And Living Green, I guess, hit a nerve with a lot of people who had never seen that written about before. So 10 years later, a little bit more than 10 years later, I wrote a book called Living Well, which is the follow-up. And that's really about living your best life, and it's organized into 6 pillars, one of which is actually staying well, which is kind of the follow-up from Living Green, which is avoiding potentially toxic things in your immediate environment. But then there's also 5 other pillars of health in Living Well.
Yeah, so Living Green is like in the one pillar, but this Living Well it's a great title, by the way. It's so much more encapsulating on all of our life. So what are the other 5 pillars?
So first of all, Living Well, when I was at GNC, when I got there, it was called GNC, Where America Shops for Health. And I repositioned the company to live well. So I've always kind of had a thing for that, the idea of living well, living your best life. So the 6 pillars are thinking well, what goes on between your ears that impacts your health. Eating well, which is a topic you're very familiar with, Katie. Mm-hmm. Moving well, which is how you move your body, not just exercise, but obviously that's a component. Sleeping well, which is a very underappreciated aspect of health and wellness, I think, maybe the most underappreciated.
I know. I think sleep is going to be the new kale, but people aren't very receptive to it. I'm not. But I know it's important.
It's harder to execute than kale in your own life. And then hosting well, which is what goes on in your gut. It's this fascinating connection between your gut health and your overall health. And then I mentioned earlier, staying well, which is avoiding toxicity, and that chapter is more the follow-up to the Living Green book.
Yeah, that's cool. I saw hosting well as a chapter, and I thought, really, like hospitality? That is very different and unique. And then I'm like, oh, gut health. Of course, that's important. That's perfect. So yeah, I mean, readers, as you can see, there's this huge encapsulation. I mean, even when you talk about thinking, that's something that I don't think enough health and wellness practitioners and, influencers talk about mindset and thinking, although it's getting to be a little more in vogue nowadays, I would say. How does this look in your own family, like as you raise your children and just living day to day?
I think one of the great parts about writing a book, especially when it's new, is that your family's seen it beforehand. And these things tend to come and go in popularity. Like there's a study that comes out on sleep and everybody's talking about sleep, or somebody famous, finds out about their microbiome and all of a sudden everybody's talking about that because it's in public awareness. So One of the advantages that my family actually recognizes that I saw that in the book and talked about it. So I get a lot of, this is exactly what you're talking about in your book. We're not perfect, but obviously I don't think anybody really is. But my kids at an early age, partially because of my interest and partially because we probably limited their choices a little bit more than we would have otherwise.
Smart.
got healthy habits and kind of made the kind of an internalized, I think, the kind of good choices that they've continued with as they've been picking their own meals and picking their own sleep habits and picking their own way of living well.
Okay, so there you have a couple of kids who are in college or beyond. What are their ages right now, Greg?
20 and 22.
Okay.
So they're in college and graduate school, yeah.
Yeah, and have you seen that it's stuck? This was not on the list, by the way. So I'm throwing this out there because I'm so personally curious. Like, I feel like it's very common when kids leave home that they try to shed what their parents have taught them, whether it be spirituality and religion or healthy habits or food or whatever. Did you see any of that going away and rebounding back, or did they stay pretty in the lane?
It's funny. It's been kind of the opposite of that, actually, Katie. So when I talk to my kids' friends, when I go visit them, they'll say, "Oh, you're where she got that." So they're kind of the little experts of their little friend groups on various aspects of this. What do I do? So when they want to feel better or try something more natural. So it's for me, it's really cool to see them kind of picking up the baton there.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to me. And I do think we live in a culture where it is becoming a lot more cool to talk about health and to talk about living naturally and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of a benefit there that you're not super counterculture anymore. We're all becoming weird. Love it. I'll
Yeah,
be
I mean,
weird.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'll be weird with you.
I'm comfortable with weird.
Yeah. So what do you think for parents who have kids who are still in the like, toddler, elementary, middle school age, what's like the most important habit or handful of habits that you feel like parents need to try to instill in their kids?
So one of them is, I'll kind of go back to my original entry point into this category, which is, people are so inundated with sweetened things, artificially and sugar sweetened things. And
Yeah.
so kids are being trained to always have something sweet, especially a drink, but also food in their mouth at all times. And that comes through in the beverage choices. I mean, if you say that what's one thing, I would go high level and say, detrain them to always think that there's something sweet coming their way. To be specific there, I would say that these juices and sodas, something like 30% of the calories in what I call the SAD, the standard American diet, are from essentially sugary beverages.
Ugh.
And if you could do one thing and just switch those to water, you'd be doing your kids a big favor. Over time, maybe weeks, not months. You can re-entrain your taste buds to not always think you're getting something sweet.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's so simple. It's simple and it's difficult at the same time, but at least it's like a singular focus and it's not trying to convince them or talk to them. It's just like you kind of said, offering the choices that are within the boundaries that you want it to be because they're still in your house, right? I always tell parents like you choose what to feed them.
It's another thing, Kate, that used to be weird and is now cool, right? So it used to be weird to carry your own water bottle around. When I first started doing that, I had this clunky, metal water bottle that was bent steel or something, from Clean Canteen. And, not decorated, right? It had a stopper on it that was ugly and, looked like kind of almost like a billy club or something. But that's, I didn't want to drink out of a plastic bottle and I didn't want to, so now you got these super cool water bottles that are insulated and they have cool designs on them. So it's a lot more, it's a lot less weird and less mainstream to, switch to water nowadays.
It is. I mean, it's more accessible when you can easily find the products that assist your lifestyle choices. So that's definitely cool. Love it. Now, what about technology? Because technology, was that in the thinking chapter, the between the
Yeah,
ears?
it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. How did you navigate that when your kids were like middle school and teens? Because they are digital natives, as Devorah Heitner, author of Screenwise, says. They've grown up with something in their hand since birth. So how did you teach them to navigate that between their ears?
That's true. There's baby strolls now that have an iPad holder. I saw those getting in line for an airplane one time.
That hurts my heart. No.
Maybe it's not new. So we put my wife and I put really big limits on that. Our kids couldn't get a cell phone until they were maybe 12 or 13 years old. I think maybe 13 for the older one and 12 for the younger one because she was more eloquent in her arguments maybe, but it was a long time and their friends all pretty much had them by then. And I'm a big fan of limiting time on those. And you have control of that up to a certain point as a parent. There's also a pretty strong incentive to, sneak it in. So there's a limit to your control, but the current phones have management tools on them that you can, like I personally use Apple's Screen Time, which you turn it on and then it gives you a window where it's more difficult to remind you to use apps. You have to release it. And I'm a big fan of that. The other thing I'm a huge fan of and would insist on in our own family is a color temperature control on the screen. So the real blue light, the real white blue light you see keeps you awake and signals your brain that it's bright daytime at noon of the equator or something. There are now settings on a Mac called Flux that you can download. We use Apple and on an iPhone called Night Shift. You can move the color temperature towards a sunset type temperature and it screws up your sleep a lot less. So we use those kind of tools and try to monitor that they were like the phones better than us while they were growing up.
That's fantastic. I also have a 13-year-old who doesn't have a cell phone yet. And his
Good for
first
you.
pitch was that everyone else has one. And I said, oh, like, have you really lived with us for 13 years? You're going to want to work on that pitch.
Not the way to, yeah. Maybe the safety is coming next, Katie. It's not safe if I don't have one. That'll be
Yeah,
nice.
he'll figure that out eventually. Now, do you see tech in general as a positive or negative force in our world overall?
Well, I mean, in general, I think that there's some technologies that I can point to, and I think they've really improved my life. I think that, if I get sick and a drug can help me, that's probably good. If I really need it, if I don't have to go to the bank and I can go to an ATM, that's pretty good. But a lot of it is very intrusive, and a lot of it is very, I think it fights against living your best life in many cases. So I would say on the whole, there's some bright spots. I like flying across the country instead of having to take a covered wagon.
Yeah.
But I don't sleep with my cell phone next to our bed and let it run my life. I try to remind it who's boss.
I like that. Make sure that we are in control of our technology and it's not controlling us, really, because we would not be having this conversation without some pretty intense technology. And here we are being able to share this really important information with the world at such a greater rate and reach than we ever could have before. That's positive. But if someone's watching this in bed, ready to go to sleep, shut it off. That's not a good idea, right? So it's that balance of figuring out where the positive draw is and where technology starts to either impact negatively or rule our lives. Scary stuff out there. Now, there's also a lot of noise out there with especially technology proliferating everything. There's so much noise about food. So what are you trying to do with your company's specialty nutrition consulting? Like, what is commercializing nutrition innovation? I don't know what that means.
So it's a really narrow specialty, and what we do here is we help from two ends of the spectrum. We help inventors of nutrition technology to find commercial markets for their innovations.
So nutrition technology like supplements, gut health testing, stuff like that?
That whole spectrum, and I'll give you one example. As a company I work with that is the head of the Allergy and Asthma Research Center at Stanford University in California, and she realized that for 25 years, pediatricians have been telling their patients to introduce food that are potential allergens really slowly, wait a long time, one at a time. And her research indicates that that's exactly the opposite of what you should be doing.
With our babies, you mean? Yeah.
With the babies, when you introduce solid foods, there's an entrainment period for your gut where it's recognizing what's an allergen and what isn't. Her name is Dr. Carrie Nadal. She's a fascinating person. And so she created a concoction that's patented that you can give to your kids, and so they can be exposed to these 16 different proteins that cause over 90% of all food allergies in puffs and in a mix into applesauce, so that it takes the inconvenience out of trying to make sure they get a tiny amount, and it's all a tiny amount of peanut and cod and whatever every single day. That's very impractical. So
oh yeah, it's supposed to be consistent.
yeah, so there's a company that's formed around that I'm on the board of directors of and help them with as part of my business practice, and we're making it a consumer product that's called Spoonful One. So that's an example. There's several examples in that category. And the other thing we do is we help big companies that have brands who are looking for credible, science-based, effective nutrition technologies to put them into their brand, find them and incorporate them into their products. So that's what I do, and it's a fascinating way to make a living. I get to be exposed to all these new nutrition innovations, kind of sort through them, help them come to life, and help people, avoid a lifetime of food allergies. In the example I just gave you. So it's a fun field.
Oh yeah, fascinating is 100% the word that came into my mind. Oh man, that is cool. What as far as like in your book, when you talk about what we should eat, what message do you kind of want to get across with your food philosophy?
So less packages, less processed, less packages. I analyze the types of diets that there are and actually poke some fun at some of them. But fresh food, close to the bottom of the food chain, Mediterranean style diet, is maybe with a little bit less pasta, is kind of where I come out on all that. And if you want to follow rules of thumb, the main rule of thumb would be minimize packages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's easy for me to digest for sure. If you could pick just like one food that should leave the American diet and be replaced with something else, what would it be?
I'd have to say sodas with water, but since I've already said that, I'll pick another.
Two foods.
Yeah. It's interesting because fried foods are a major source of high density calories in the American diet.
Okay.
Something like 35% of total calories in the standard American diet. The average American eats 29 pounds of French fries every year, just French fries. And there's been some recent research that shows that fried foods really increase your risk of common killer diseases like stroke and cardiovascular disease. So if I get to pick one and be soda, replacing soda with water, and if I get to pick two, I'd say cut out fried foods and find alternatives. There's delicious alternatives out there.
That's interesting. Does the research show yet what it is about fried foods? Because I know in commercial restaurants, fried foods are normally in like soybean and corn oil, which are going to be those highly inflammatory stuff. I make some killer homemade French fries in beef tallow and coconut oil. I feel like they're probably okay, but I'm super curious if the research looked at nuances like that.
So it does, and there are some oils when they're fried that are more inflammatory to your body and internally inflammatory than others. So the other thing though is that fried foods are just generally very calorie dense. So if you're having the occasional homemade French fries, that's not really what kills you. or increases your risk of it's the kind of the chronic where it's sort of a third of your daily calories, which is pretty darn typical.
Yeah,
And
I mean those kids in the high school cafeterias that get French fries and pizza every day, like
right, yeah. So there's that. It's really the chronic, highly calorie dense consumption of foods that ends up having you overeat, and the ripple effect from that. That's really the macro problem.
interesting because it's so easy to eat too much too. I think it's Michael Pollan who says eat junk food if you make it. Because if you make it yourself, the junkier the food, the longer it takes. You're not going to do homemade French fries and donuts and all that stuff on a daily basis. Nobody has time for that.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, I wish we had time to like go through all 6 pillars, but then we would just have a read aloud book. And that's not really what we're here for. But so far, this has been so interesting. And, your book is going to be a great guide for people. I think especially, here at Kitchen Stewardship, we talk about seeking all that balance in all these different places too. So it's a perfect fit for our readers. But I like to talk about practical baby steps. And we've covered a couple, right? Cut the soda, cut the fried foods. We've talked a little bit about technology. Do you, outside of that, do you have like a quick win practical baby step that you would just want to leave people with? Like, do this today.
Yeah, I think that that one thing I'm going to go back to water actually, Katie, which sounds like the most basic thing, but literally it is the most basic thing that there is. So most people don't drink enough water, and that can increase your appetite and decrease your ability to detoxify cells, especially if you can combine water with fiber. So you're probably not drinking enough water. The average American gets 15 grams a day of fiber. The USDA recommends that people get 30 grams a day of fiber. There's 6 grams of fiber in an apple, for example.
Okay.
So I'm going to stick to the basics here, something everybody can follow, and get 15 more grams of fiber a day, which is equivalent to 3 apples, and drink more water. I personally drink a gallon a day of water, and that's about twice what health experts recommend, but I feel fantastic, so I stick with that.
And listening to your body is so important. I know one of our longtime contributing writers here at Kitchen Stewardship, don't be mad, but we actually have a post called "Water is Making You Fat" or something like that, because people will try to drink so much water and it actually doesn't make them feel good. It actually depletes their body, but they need to drink and hydrate. But again, my writer Mary has this great concoction where she adds oh gosh, what is it? Electrolytes, and there's all sorts of stuff she'll add to her water.
Yep.
And so she's still hydrating, but she would say the plain water is sometimes sucking nutrients from your body and diluting them. I don't know what I believe, to be honest, but I think about her post all the time because that's such a common recommendation. Like, drink a gallon of water. You feel great. It's probably good for you. When Mary drank a gallon of water up every day, she felt fatigued.
I'll clarify that if you live in Florida where it's 82 degrees right now and you're exercising outdoors a lot, drink a lot of water.
Gotcha. Sure.
I'll clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're in Michigan where it's 11 degrees right now, I might do some herbal tea instead.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Greg Horn, author of Living Well. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And again, I know that you have so much wisdom and experience to share with the world, and that's what we do here too. So Kitchen Stewardship readers, go out, buy the book, get it at your library if you want. Tell your library to get the book. And it's definitely a great roadmap. So thanks again for being here, Greg.
Thanks, Katie. Enjoyed it.